it was completely outside of my comfort zone. It wasn't something that I'd ever thought of doing, but because it was something God called me to, I just said yes to it,
Yeah.
you know? Hey everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hello.
And we are so glad that you're here with us today. As you guys know, this week we are talking about starting new things. So yesterday, we talked about starting a new business. And today we are talking about starting a new calling.
Yeah, we're going to share some of our stories today about different times in our life that we've experienced that. And but first, what's the problem of doing that? Sometimes I think is, for me anyway, it's I'm not sure if I can even do that, or am I really the right person for the job? And having to get over stuff like that.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the things that came up for me too, was this idea that when you start something, when God calls you to do something, sometimes it's so hard to know, am I making this up? Is this all just in my own little brain,
Yeah. So it helps, and I think our stories will reflect this. If someone
outside the situation.
Yeah, it kind of is like, hey, I think you'd be good for this.
Right.
So somebody asks you to step into this leadership role, but then you still, at least I still, I'm like, well, why do they want me to do it? They maybe see something that you don't.
Right, yeah. Well, I think, God's calling always involves leaving your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it's like, I don't know if I can do this because it's not, it's a little bit of a push for your skill set.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just had actually a fascinating sermon at our church on Sunday by a guy named Jim Barnes, who's a guest speaker, and he was talking about the call of Abraham and Sarah, and he said that, it's impossible to follow the Lord unless we are willing to be interrupted. His whole thing was making a plan
Nice.
and then it getting interrupted, and he had a great story about going on vacation, so flying in an airplane, renting a car, and it got interrupted a lot,
Yeah.
and life is like that. If it didn't get
Definitely.
interrupted and we were just in control of everything, we wouldn't really accomplish anything, I don't think.
Yeah.
So we can't achieve our goals without moving forward into our calling, I think is the point there. Like if we've got goals, but we're not taking steps, how are they going to get accomplished?
Right. Well, and I think, it's so easy to let fear be what's holding you back. But it withers our souls. Like, that's one of the things that I've discovered in my life is when I don't step into the things that God's called me to do, I'm miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, just saying no day after day after day after day, that can really wreck your life.
What do you mean, say no to what? A calling?
To God's calling,
Yeah.
yeah. Just being like, no, I don't want to, that's scary. I'm not going to do that. I'm not.
Yeah.
Sometimes even, that uncertainty, you pray about it and then it doesn't go away till you take a step.
Mm-hmm.
And then God either slams the door or brings confirmation. But yeah, that fear, I think, can hold you back. And then it's way too easy to end up, suddenly it's like 5 years later and you're like, oh, still not doing that thing.
What about some people so we're like, oh, you feel this calling and you've got to answer. You got to say yes and step out in faith and pursue it. Abraham heard a definite voice from God saying, move, and he did it. But maybe someone's like, I don't know what my calling would even be. How, what would that voice be? And I think, definitely if you're a Christian, if there's things you feel strongly about and things that you desire, and the stories we're going to talk about are from our own desire. So one for you, Liz, would be theology illiteracy, the problem of that in the church, and that led you
I'm
to
very
your
passionate
story.
about that.
Yeah, and a big thing for me is relationships in the church and how they work and why they don't work.
Right.
And so if you've got a thing like that that's like super important to you, chase that down, follow that.
Yeah.
You can't just think about how much of a problem it is and maybe wish it was different. It's never going to change. And that's going to take a step out in faith to try to chase down a solution, or at least, I mean, we haven't solved those problems,
Right.
but we're walking towards a goal deliberately.
Unfortunately, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. You know, you're enabling the situation to continue if you're not actively working to fix it. Because a lot of the times, at least I've noticed this in my own life, people don't see those problems, which I think is insane because they're like neon lights blinking in my brain.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of the times people honestly don't see the problem. And if there's not somebody, you know, even if it's just standing up and saying, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, like, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. And they may see something else as their number one, and we don't know anything about it. There's 1,000 ways to fulfill your, I mean, to be called.
Yeah.
And to chase that down. I mean, these are things that are big deals to us. So, like, Liz, what was your experience in college?
Well, so I was really passionate about theology. And actually, I was going to say really quick, another way to find your calling, if you're not sure what it is find out something that has been a trauma area for you in your life, because God tends to use our pain and turn that into our passion.
Yeah.
And so for me, my youth group went through a really awful few years. I mean, it split, and part of that was over theology. So after that experience, I was like, I don't care about theology. Like, theology just causes division. Who cares? We just need to focus on helping people grow. Screw theology, you know?
It's for ivory towers. And
exactly.
It's not for real life stuff.
Exactly. So then when I went to Moody, and I started with a degree in missions because I felt called to some kind of full-time ministry. And I hated all my missions classes, and I loved my theology classes. And ended up switching my major, but there was a group on campus called the Student Theological Society, and it was at the end of my sophomore year, the president graduated, and they voted for a president, and they voted me to become president, which was a little insane because I had never been to a single meeting. So it was like they came and they're like, hey, we voted for you to be president. Would you do that? And I was like, what the heck?
Had you ever heard of that group before?
No, I didn't know anything about them. So it was this whole crazy process of trying to figure out what the group was, figure out why they were doing what they were doing, and actually having a totally different vision for what the group had been doing, and then changing it.
Sure. Well, they voted for you.
Exactly. So, and it was one of my favorite things that I did at Moody.
Yeah. But at first, how daunting was it?
Oh, it was insane. Because I was just like, I don't know any of these people. And actually, everyone except for 2 members had graduated the year before. You know, I was very passionate about helping people understand both how theology and practice work together. You can't live in an ivory tower, but you can't just apply unless you have good theology to apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Yeah, that's such a funny story.
I know. Well, it was kind of crazy. But it was one of those things where the Lord was just like, here you go.
Yeah.
And since I was very passionate about theology, I was like, okay. Mm-hmm.
And you learned to do it as you're doing it, how to be the president of the club.
Totally. Yeah. And as I said, we revamped everything. I mean, I had a great group of people who ended up doing it with me, and we completely changed the structure and the mission, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think that's a great example of, you know, God refining that passion.
And it takes surrender. You know, I mean, that's what we're talking about today. It's surrender, because it's Tuesday. So it does take, you know, God sends a call into your life, but then you have to follow it. You have to actually step out and say, okay, Lord. I mean, it was completely outside of my comfort zone. It wasn't something that I'd ever thought of doing, but because it was something God called me to, I just said yes to it, you know?
Yeah.
So Go ahead and tell your story, dear.
Well, mine, and it's the process of becoming an elder, which is, again, sort of like you, I guess, not even on my radar as a churchgoer. I mean, I was happy to be a small group leader and involved in the small group. Like the relationship part is what was important to me. I was like, I want to be part of facilitating, good relationships here. I want there to be unity in the body, and so that's kind of what I was doing. And then I got nominated, and it was shocking, and
Only to you, dear.
it was shocking. So, and then again, kind of like you, I was like, well, I guess I'll say yes to this and see how it goes. And
Right.
well, yeah, definitely stepping out of my comfort zone and saying yes, and then getting to know the guys. And now, like, those are some of my strongest relationships at church now, are the guys on the elder board, the pastor and the elder board. And I think
Right.
that just kind of makes sense because you're in there talking about some really difficult stuff, seeing, some of these men, I knew that they were elders, and I'd seen them on their Sunday morning self. And not that they're like heathens in the boardroom, but it's a different. There's a little bit more transparency and emotion there, and that's a good thing. And
Right.
it's amazing to see. And there's tangible. How do I work out my faith, even though I'm angry or I'm scared about this situation at church or whatever? And we can do that together. And so the relationship part is still there. And actually now, we at our church, you kind of take turns being the elder chairman, and I'm doing that. And that was another, like, I don't know if I can do this, but it kind of,
And now you do an awesome job.
I don't know, but we are.
I do.
But so now I have some authority in the group, and we've initiated some things that have actually strengthened our relationships even more.
Yeah, God's used that passion you have for relationships and unity to really help gel the group together.
I think so. And so I'm trying to say yes, and I'm being myself, and I'm caring about the things that I care about because of the way God made me, and it's having an effect. And I feel like I'm kind of watching it happen, even though I'm taking active steps and I'm being involved in the process and I'm doing things. And that's kind of how you turned the theology group at school around too. It's like, well, I guess if I'm going to be the leader, then this is my
We're
vision.
going to do it this way.
And then things change,
Right,
and that's some
yeah.
tangible stuff. And that just comes from saying yes and trying
surrendering, because God put you there for a reason. Like, he picked the tool that he wanted for what he was going to do. So
That's right.
being able to just be like, okay, Lord, what do you want to do? Help me to just be faithful.
Yeah. And I guess, we can only talk about our own experiences where we're both hesitant to get plopped into that role, and then finding that we like it, but it's still scary.
Or it's still hard. I mean, that's one of the things that, I wrote down too. Like, a lot of surrender is just perseverance. Like, for instance, with writing, being called to write a book and then writing it. And how I was writing my first book. I was like ripping the manuscript up sometimes just because I was so like, oh, why can't I stop? Like, I was so clear on this is what I was called to do, but it was just so hard that I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But I just still kept being like, okay, Lord, I know this is what you want me to do. This is hard. I keep trying to do it,
Right. Yeah. And an even more tangible example would be getting married. If at some point you're like, this is the person I'm going to marry, I'm going to do it. And then you can't 10 years later say, I don't know, and walk away from that. Like, by the grace of God, it can work. I mean, it takes two people, obviously, or becoming a parent. You're signing up for a 20, 50, 60 year long relationship.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing journey. But yeah, surrendering to the process, the way, and taking steps. Like, surrender is not just laying down and meditating and doing nothing. It's being active.
Yeah.
But it's being obedient.
And it's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, being able to be used by the Holy Spirit is a high like nothing else. It's so incredibly fun.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear if you have any stories like that, starting something new, being called to something and not being sure about it and surrendering to the process. Hit us
Yeah.
up on Facebook, our Facebook group, or on Twitter. We would love to hear that.
Yes, and if you are not already a member of our Facebook group, we'd love for you to join, to be part of a community of people who are working to surrender. Surrender isn't easy. It's hard work.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to it. I think it's Epic Everyday Cast, facebook.com/, but we'll put it down there, our Twitter as well. We'd love to start sharing some stories.
Yep.
And thanks for listening to ours.
Yeah, and we would love to have you guys back, as I said. We're talking about starting new stuff this week, so if you would like to hear more about starting personal growth, like new personal growth in your life, and being centered in the middle of that, come back tomorrow.
That's right. Look forward to talking to you then.
All right, we're praying for you guys. Work on surrender today.